Strary here, working today with our friends at Jessie James Beads, and I'm super excited because this is the second video that I've done with their beautiful new collection called the Ombre collection. So some of you who know me, you know that I take an empty project tray when I'm about to start a project, and I pull supplies and things that may or may not go into my project. But here are some of the bits from the Ombre collection that are not cut open, and I've gone back to some of my past Magical Mystery bead boxes and some of the things that were left over. I did these two bracelets already with this collection, so some of my Ombre bead strands have been cut open, but I have my little project tray on the side so I can pull things in for my design. Today I'm going to be working with a few of the strands from the Ombre collection and these stunning focal beads. I have put 20 gauge wire through this and done simple loops to turn this into a component, and I'm going to add this into the most stunning chain. I'm making a chain and making some of my own beads for the chain, and the techniques are really simple, and I'm going to show you what that is. But this bead is so gorgeous. When I first got it, I was trying to figure out what kind of glass it was. It took me a minute or two to realize that it's a chunky, beautiful iridescent acrylic bead, but I love that for what I'm going to do because it doesn't add extra weight, even though it's got such a gorgeous chunkiness and profile. So let me show you what's gotten started here. This is the beginning of the chain, and this is a beaded chain, kind of like what I say, a beaded chain on steroids, because I am connecting each of the beads, but I'm making some beads for my chain, like this little spiral and this little ring bead or O bead, and I'm making some, like this kind of looks like a bead to me. This was from another strand that I also used in this bracelet. So this is what I have so far, and I'm going to show you all the little steps, but this part is so repetitive that I just decided to do get it started off camera. So I'm going to be working on this end. And so this is going to be the next bead that gets attached, and I'll show you exactly how I made these components. Sometimes I will connect my components with jump rings, but today I am using the 2¼ millimeter one-step looper, so my loops are a little bit larger, and that kind of gives it the fluidity and the movability that a jump ring would, because the loop is larger. So the next component that I want to make is this round one. So I'm going to give you a close-up of this so you can see. This contains one number 2 crimp tube crimped with a magical crimper and one little seed bead, and this here is from this gorgeous ombre strand of gemstone beads. They're faceted and just stunning, and they ombre from like a darker blue to a pale blue into a white and back to a darker blue. And I've also used that on my spiral bead that I made, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do the spiral bead as well. But this one is super simple, and I'll show you the pattern, and so now you're seeing where it gets connected into the chain and why we do it that way. So I literally am taking a scrap of my blue, forget the color, turquoise or something, of my 49 strand bead stringing wire that I used in this bracelet, and I had some scraps left over, and that is all that I'm using. I don't throw anything away. And to that little scrap, I'm adding 6 of those faceted gemstones, 1 gold seed bead, and then 6 more, and then a number 2 crimp tube. So that is the little pattern. And when you turn this into a circle, what you're going to do is have this other end going through the crimp tube in the opposite direction. So just put it in there and give it a pull, and there's the ring. So now you see why our connecting is going to be here in between these 6 beads and on this side in between these 6 beads. And these are super easy to make. I'm just going to take my magical crimping plier, and to start off with, I pull it pretty tight, but the plier is going to move things apart a little bit because it has to fit in there, and you need that for the connecting, so it works out really well. So I'm just going to hold both of these and just get in there with my magical crimping plier. Before I close it, I want to make sure that the tube is right in the center of the plier, and I just feel that it is. And now I am going to give it a nice pull and close my plier. So I've just pinched the 4 corners of the number 2 crimp tube, and now I'm going to go back in the opposite direction. Make sure before I close the plier that it's in the center. That's the trick to this tool, and I can feel that it is not. Okay, now I'm going to close again, and then just open and close the plier a few times. On a ring, you have to rotate your work kind of that way. And when I take it away, I have a beautiful little bead. And so the number 2 crimp tube takes on the size and shape of an 11-0 seed bead. So it kind of tricks the eye. And for a non-jewelry maker, when I trim these really close, they'll look and have really no idea how this little bead is held together. It's so cool because it looks infinite. It just goes around and around. So that little component is done, and I'm going to come to this end and continue my chain. So I think up next I was going to do one of these. I just loved these large crystal beads, and the gradient of color was just magical. I'll show you. I hated to cut the strand and disturb them, but you can even see that they are just absolutely beautiful. So I think I'm going to do that one there, and then that, and what is going to be next? I'm going to take a piece of 20 gauge wire, and I'm going to use my 2¼ millimeter one-step looper. When you don't have any beads on your wire, you don't need to put the wire through the guide hole of the tool because it makes a fresh cut for you here, and you would just be wasting ½ inch of wire. So I'm going to pull this back, gently close it here. I can see that my wire is just past the back jaw of the plier, and also that my wire is against this back plate, and it's making a fresh cut for me and making that loop. And now I can pull my wire down as I'm closing. Now that loop is centered on this wire, and now I can warm and smooth the wire, make sure it's straight, and when I take the tool away, absolute loop perfection. So I have a little trouble with my hands, so when I'm making a beaded chain, I love this tool. It really saves my hand. And when I have a lot of components to make, I won't even set the tool down. I just kind of flip it out of my way and then, continue making my components. On this one, I use the dark blue beads from one of the ombre strands that I had already cut open for this set of bracelets. And these little spacers are so stunning. These are from our magical mystery bead box that we had a couple months back called Degas, and there was this whole little assortment of discs and spacer beads, and look at the effect of these, just perfect. And it's one of the things that I love about Jessie James Beads bead mixes. It feels like no matter how much I use out of the little pots and jars, I still have so much left. Like this is a really old one. I don't even remember what year. Is she a wildflower? But obviously I did a lot of projects, and look how much is still in there. And I pulled from that for my charms and dangles for this piece. So you really get your money's worth out of a Jessie James bead mix, and nobody does a bead mix like they do. So I'm gonna turn my piece around so that my opening of my simple loop is on this side, and I have this gorgeous little stack. And now this time I will use the guide hole. I'm going to push the wire all the way through and gently close my tool, and I'm going to watch right here to make sure that I have about 1 millimeter of space before I let the tool make that cut for me. And now I can see that I'm putting stress on my beads, so I'm not popping this or continuing to close, I'm going to pull my stack down, and if I feel like I'm going to damage my bead, I'll stop closing, because these are unusual shapes. So with just round beads, you don't have to watch this so much, but when you have a cool shape, you may not be able to close your loop all the way. And in this case, I didn't, but I'm going to open this anyway. It's a simple loop, so I'm going to open it for connecting anyway. So let's go ahead and connect these few pieces here that are done, because this is the most fun. As you make your components, your piece just unfolds before your eyes. And so also on simple loops, I'll open and close my pliers with a little bit of force. That makes sure that they're work hardened, but also they are closed perfectly. So I really like using that tool for this, but you can totally make simple loops with your pliers very easily. You know, I would say get your own rhythm, do what, you know, works for you. So on my little bead ring, I'm going to find the middle of one side. So I'm going to put my simple loop in between those 6 beads. Just snuggle it in there so it looks like that, and close the loop really well. So it's like a beaded connector. I love making these. I've done whole bracelets out of these. You can make the most beautiful beaded chain this way, but they add texture, and it adds like another size bead. And you know, these beads are quite small, so if you tried to string these, they would be lost next to the larger scale beads. But when you turn them into a ring, you get them into your design, and they're the right size and scale for the design. And now we're going to come to this little component that we just made, which to me also looks like a cool bead. You know, it's almost like I created another bead. And I'm going to do the same thing, just connect this in between those 6 micro-faceted beads. Just wiggle it in there. So now you see why that little bit of space that was created when we did the magical crimp is used up in the connecting, and it just looks perfect. So I'm going to close that really well. Just get my pliers in there, make sure it's closed, and do my little work hardening. And so there we have added some section to our chain. And up next, I think I am going to do, I don't want to finish my 2 ends on the same bead, so I'm going to do this one as my final bead on this side. And let's see, I want to do another spiral bead, and I added that one up here, so I think I'm actually going to put my spiral bead in here. I think I'm going to separate these two. This is like a really eclectic chain, like handmade chain, and so I just don't want it too lined up, and I want to you know, kind of separate my different components. So I think that's a good place for my spiral bead. So I'm going to take another piece of the 20 gauge wire, and I'm also going to take a piece of 22 gauge wire. Now normally I would do this beaded bead all on 20 gauge wire, but I want to make it out of these gemstones, and they have really small holes. So I needed to go down to 22 gauge, but it's okay. I'll show you exactly how we're going to stabilize it. I'm going to use my 1-step looper on the end of this 22 gauge wire, but I'm going to go down to the smallest size, the 1.5 millimeter, and I'm going to put that little 22 gauge wire in there and get a simple loop in this wire, just like we did, and it looks like that. And now I am going to thread on my little bead pattern, and I think I might do my second little spiral bead a little bit different than I did this one, because again, I don't want anything too contrived or too matchy-matchy on this chain. I want it to be, you know, just super interesting and textural and just continually change. It's just a really interesting. So I'm going to thread this little pattern on exactly the way that I did here. And what what I did was 3 of these beads, and if you can like pinch them off, you can like sometimes run your wire right up the middle. I'm going to get 3 of them on and just let them come down to the simple loop, and I'm going to dump a few of these seed beads onto my tray. These were left over from the Jesse James Beads summer camp, and it's a beautiful gold and silver mix, and you could mix gold and silver. It's a really pretty look for 2025, but I'm just going to pick out the gold ones. I'm only using it as a spacer bead. So I'm just going to put 1 gold one on, and then let me do 3 more of these beads. I want to pull them off of the strand, kind of in the order that they're on the strand, to keep the position of the ombre. So I got 2 of them that time. They're really small. Sometimes it's difficult to get your fingers out of the way. Okay, so another 3, another gold seed bead, and I'm going to thread, on this one I did 5 sections of 3, and I think I'm going to do a little bit more, maybe 7. I'm going to string away and see how I feel about it, and I'll get these loaded on here, and then I'll come back and show you how we turn this into a spiral bead. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sections this time, and so I'm gonna need to leave some empty space on this wire. I'm gonna put another simple loop in the end, but I need to leave about 3/4 of an inch to an inch. It's more than you think, but when I turn this into a spiral, the spiraling takes up some length of the wire, and it will tighten up the beads. So it's going to look a little bit strange to leave up, let these be so loose on the wire. But I'm going to come back with my 1.5 millimeter one-step looper. This time I will go through the guide hole and just gently close the tool here so that I can see how. Don't worry about the loops being lined up because they're going to get twisted anyway, and I think I even want a little bit more space than that, so like maybe about an inch. And I'm just going to let the tool make that cut for me. Whoops, it flipped out. You have to keep your wire against the back plate of the tool, and I'm going to do the same thing, center the loop on the wire, but honestly on this this is going to get twisted. This loop really didn't close all the way, but that's okay. It's going to get twisted, and it's going to need to have some reshaping anyway. And then what I use to do my spirals is this little mandrel. It comes in a set of 2, and I'm going to use the smaller one and make this kind of tight. Let me pull my other spiral up here so you can see. I want to make it kind of, kind of a tight spiral. So I'm going to lay this simple loop on the mandrel and get a hold of it with my thumb. And I'm going to push my beads up a little at a time, because once the spiral is in, your beads are not going to really move so much. And you do have to be careful because you're pressing gemstone beads and glass seed beads against metal, but that's why one of the reasons for the extra space. And don't worry about it being perfect, because once you get your twist in, then we'll do a little hand sculpting and we'll do a little bit of adjusting. So I'm just kind of moving my beads down a little bit before I continue spiraling. I'm just spiraling and kind of pushing my beads as I turn and just get to the end. And again, don't worry about your loops or where anything lands, because we are going to like hand sculpt that. So from here you can like pull and adjust your beaded bead, but what we have to do is get this loop in position for the wire that goes through the middle that stabilizes the bead. So again, you're going to misshape and you're going to open these loops. Don't worry about that. This is only 22 gauge wire. So what I'm going to do is pull this so that it is centered on the bead. I'll show you in just 1 second. I do want that loop to be closed. So once I get it in position, make sure that loop is closed. And so I'm going to take my 22 gauge wire and just use it to see. So I got that one pretty good. And I'm going to come to this end and do the same thing. I just want to get that little loop to be in the very center of my coil. That looks like it's not centered. So you can do a little hand sculpting here. And, you know, it's a twisty little thing. And so you can hand sculpt. You can, this one turned out really pretty. And this bead is so gorgeous with an ombre collection because as the bead spins, you see all the colors. So that's what we have. And let's see, am I happy with it? Just from here, I just want to make sure that I'm as centered as I can be before I finish the loop. And it actually looks really good to me. Okay. And then again, if you want to pull your spiral out a little bit or push it in, there's a little bit of springiness to this, and that's going to work in our favor, and I'll show you how. So I'm going to come back in with my larger size one-step looper because I want this loop to be the same as all of my other connecting loops, and just get my first loop in the tool. And then I created a finished look to this bead with these gorgeous little enamel bead caps. Look at that. They were left over in, you know, one of my bead mixes. Like I always say, the Jesse James beads, nobody does a bead mix like them. But you make and make and make, and your jars don't get empty. So I go back to them all the time for little fill-in supplies. And in that same little mix were these gorgeous crystals that were half metallic and half clear. And so that's going to be the end of my beaded bead. And then I'm going to run my 20 gauge wire through both loops and send that down to my little bead stack and repeat the same thing on this end. One of those crystals and then a bead cap. And then here's where this tool can be really cool. So this, like, that is just so gorgeous. I love making these beads. So I'm going to get a hold of my first loop and line everything up. And now I'm going to put my 20 gauge wire, this time through the guide hole. And normally I say, you know, to back this off a millimeter or so. But in this case, I'm actually going to push it really tight. And can you see that I'm tightening up my beaded bead? And that's what I want. So before I'm holding it just so that I can see what I'm doing here. So if I want to make any adjustments to my spiral, I can do that now. Okay, and now I'm going to let the tool do the work for me. Make that cut and don't let it flip out of there. It's really helpful to keep your wire on this back plate, and if it slips out, just push it back on that back plate. I'm going to close that loop, pull it down so my loop is centered. If anything became misaligned, you can use the tool to help you, and a pair of pliers to help you get back on track. And when I take the tool away, that little beaded bead is done. Isn't it gorgeous? I love making these. I feel like, I always say, I feel like this should come with a warning because it's addictive. Once you make one of these, you want to sit and make a whole bunch. So this is going to get attached to this side right here, just the way you do if it were just a normal beaded component. And again, I just want to make sure that all my loops are closed really well and work hardened. And I'm going to open this simple loop here and attach it. And work harden. And my chain is just like gorgeous. It's unfolding between my very eyes. Look at that, you guys. I love this so much. I do think that I want to make one more of my purple components to finish off on this end. So let me get another little piece of 20 gauge wire and do that. Okay, I'm going to add that in right there. And then what I have here is this gorgeous paper clip chain. I cannot talk today. This gorgeous chain, and I am going to add this right to my simple loops. And I love long necklaces, and I am not even going to put a clasp on this. This is going to be an easy pop over my head design. So I'm just going to open this simple loop and add my final link of chain right there. And so what's really fun about this is if you like shorter necklaces, you could make this 18-inch, you could make this a choker. If you like longer necklaces, you could make this like all the way down to your belt and be, you know, really dramatic. And so I didn't even measure this. I'm just going to add this chain in, and I'm going to wear this super long. And then you could also layer when you have like this as your longest piece. But one of the reasons I want this so long is because of all of the interest, all of the beauty on my chain here. I really want to be able to see all of these beads and play with them. I mean, this chain is so gorgeous. The two different sizes of beaded beads, my handmade rings, these gorgeous focal beads that are part of the Ombre collection, these crystals that are the coolest shape. The geometry in these crystals is absolutely amazing, and I really want this to hang in front of me so that I can see all the beads and touch them and play with them. But we are not done yet. I am going to add in some little charms, and I'll show you what I have done here. This is also from this old bead mix, some little acrylic flower beads and some more of those enamel bead caps, and then I topped it off with one of the gemstones that's in my beaded beads. And I did a couple of these, and there's a cool technique. I made my own head pins for this. So can you see the little like spiral situation coming out of the bead? I'm going to show you how I did that. So I'm going to take about a 6 or 7 inch piece of that 22 gauge wire, and I'm going to use the smallest mandrel on my bail making plier and put the wire in there and make a little curve, and I'm starting a coil here. I want this to be a super neat coil. I'm going to lay one wrap, I meant to say, right on top of the previous one and just coil up. It's kind of important that the coil be neat and tight to make this head pin, but if it's not, you can actually fix that pretty easily before you take it off the plier. And I'm going to do this one a little bit with a little bit of extra coils just because I want to see it peeking out of my bellflower, and there's a little bit of space there. So I'm going to do a few extra wraps, coils. Okay, that should be good. And then I'm going to get this wire, let me reposition, on the other side of my tool like that. And while it's in the tool, I'm going to bend this, use this to help me bend it straight up. It's only 22 gauge wire, so it's pretty forgiving. And now while it's still in the tool and I can hold on to that coil, I can come with my other pliers, pull it up a little bit, and do anything I need to do. Like if I needed to tighten those coils, you can also snip the last one off of a head pin like this. But you know, just kind of get it going where I want. And then when I take it off the tool, whoops, come back. When I take it off the tool, I have the beginning of a little head pin, and I'm just going to grab a hold of it and kind of center the upward part of the wire. because that's going to come up through the middle of all the beads. And like I said, you can, sometimes I snip this last coil, sometimes I grab a hold of the end and just pull it to the center. Okay, that looks pretty good. And just get this nice and straight. And now I'm going to start with one of these little flowers, and like 22 gauge wire. So I actually let these be a little bit wonky because I thought it looked more like a wildflower. So I just let it kind of hang out. And then I'm just stacking bead caps. Like these little bead caps were also from that mix. And then I'm going to put the enamel one right on top of that. And then one of the micro-faceted gemstones that's also appearing in my project. And so I have this beautiful, beautiful little flower. And I'm just going to do a wire wrapped loop here. Get a hold of that wire, give it a 90-degree bend, put my round nose plier in the bend, bring this over the top barrel of the plier, rotate. So now what was the bottom, a barrel on the plier, is now on the top. And then I'm just going to bring this wire all the way around and just center everything. Make sure that loop is centered on my flowers. And when I take that away, I have a really pretty loop, and I get a hold of it with my bent chain nose pliers and just wrap down to my beads. And again, I like to do neat wraps. That's my style. I'll just place one wrap or coil right beneath the previous one until I meet my beads, and then trim and tuck that cut end so nothing is sharp. Just gently be careful, because that's a gemstone at the top of this stack that's really small, but I got it. And so I have my little charms. I need to make some jump rings, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I like this plier for making jump rings. I like the long mandrel. I can just make a nice long coil of jump rings unencumbered. Just going to smooth and warm my wire. I just find that the wire performs a little bit better for me when I just warm it between my fingers a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing that we just did. Just make a coil and just lay one wire or one wrap beneath the other. But if you can see, on this time I'm coiling toward the handle of the tool, so that way my jump rings, I'll coil this whole length, and my jump rings are going to go off the end of my pliers, so I can coil the whole thing and get a lot of jump rings at once. Okay, now I take my coil off, and I'm going to go back to where I started coiling, and with the flush side of my cutters, I'm going to snip a straight line up that coil, one jump ring at a time. Okay, and I will have some extra ones for my next project. So I'm going to take out 4. I might even put 2 of these on one jump ring. So let's see, if I put 2 here and do one on this side and one on that side. That is so pretty. Okay, I'm going to open these jump rings and attach this little flower garden to my necklace. So on this paper clip chain too, when you're attaching, there is a like right and a left side. So for attaching charms, I'm going to come to this side. I'm going to put 2 of these. I'm going to put these 2 on one jump ring, and I'm going to add this one right here. And then my next charm is going to go on the opposite side of the link above that one. And when I pick this up and when it's on the neck, they'll hang like in a pretty cluster and not be all on one side of the chain. Oh, you guys, this is the prettiest necklace. It's so beautiful for spring. I love the ombre. I love the colors. I love the little flower garden right on one side. It's asymmetrical. It's textural. It's it's fun. It's whimsical, but it's elegant and classy at the same time. And it's simple, a pop over your head necklace. I am so in love with this project, and I hope that you'll give it a try. Check out the Ombre collection on the Jessie James Beads website. There will be links in the description box for that. And I thank you so much for watching. I hope everybody's safe and well and having fun on your beading mats. Ciao, friends.